The auction signs went up before sunrise. Bright orange stakes hammered into the gravel lane, each one carrying the same words no farming family ever wanted to see. Estate equipment sale. Land offering pending. By noon, half the county knew. By evening, everyone did. The Mercer farm, 720 acres of black Iowa ground held by one family for 3 generations, was slipping away. And Daniel Mercer stood in the machine shed pretending not to look at the signs. He was 62, broad-shouldered once, worn thinner now by years of weather, debt, and the kind of stress that never announced itself but slowly lived in a man's back and eyes. He ran a hand along the hood of an old combine and said nothing. His son, Ethan, watched from the doorway. Ethan was 32, taller than his father, quieter by nature, built by the same land but from a different era. He had come back to the farm 6 years earlier after working AG Logistics in Des Moines. He returned because Daniel needed help. He stayed because the farm needed saving. At least, that had been the plan. Now orange signs lined the road. "We can still pull them," Ethan said. Daniel gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "With what?" Neither answered. The trouble hadn't started this year. It almost never did. It began years earlier with 2 wet springs, 1 drought summer, machinery breakdowns at the wrong time, rising input costs, and grain prices that never seemed to rise when expenses did. Then came a bad operating note refinance. Then medical bills after Ethan's mother got sick. After she passed, Daniel stopped planning long-term. He just survived season to season. Survival was expensive. The lender had been patient longer than most would have been. But patience had limits, and limits had arrived last month in the form of a meeting with clean folders and polite voices. Restructure or liquidate. They had tried restructure. The numbers didn't hold. Now liquidation was closer than either man wanted to admit. Ethan picked up a wrench from the bench, then set it back down. How much time? Daniel stared through the shed wall, as if he could see the answer outside. Equipment sale in 3 weeks. Land after harvest if nothing changes. Nothing changes. On a farm, those words could mean weather. Today they meant ruin. That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light that had hung there since he was a boy. Ledgers, loan statements, grain contracts, tax folders, handwritten notes from Daniel. Everything spread across the wood surface like pieces from different puzzles mixed together. He worked until 2 in the morning, then 3. By dawn, he had learned what he already suspected. The farm was not dead. It was trapped. Too much short-term debt, choking too much long-term value. The land could support them. The structure could not. He found Daniel outside greasing a planter chain no one might use again. "I need every loan paper since 8 years ago," Ethan said. Daniel didn't look up. "Why?" "Because I think they're measuring the wrong thing." Daniel wiped his hands slowly. "The bank's been measuring farms longer than you've been alive." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But not this one." The next week became war by paperwork. Ethan built spreadsheets Daniel distrusted on principle. He traced interest resets, duplicated fees, equipment values booked below market, prepaid inputs counted wrong, and a parcel lease never entered as income. He called grain buyers, requested updated basis numbers, repriced stored corn, revalued machinery using current auction comps instead of distressed assumptions. By Friday, he had something he hadn't seen in months. Possibility. Not enough to save them by itself, but enough to fight with. He scheduled a meeting with the lender. The bank branch sat 15 miles away, brick-faced, clean, and climate-controlled in a way no machine shed ever would be. The loan officer, Karen Holt, had handled their account for 4 years. Fair, direct, not sentimental. She listened as Ethan laid out corrected figures. Daniel sat beside him with folded arms, saying almost nothing. Karen reviewed page after page. "These adjustments help," she said carefully. "They do more than help," Ethan replied. "They show serviceability if maturities are extended and the operating line is separated from legacy medical debt." Karen looked at him over the folder. "You should have gone into banking." "I went into farming," Ethan said. "Same stress. Worse chairs." Even Daniel almost smiled. Then Karen's expression settled. "There's still a problem." She slid one document forward. A debt covenant tied to the previous refinance. If the loan-to-value ratio fell below a threshold after updated land comps, the bank had authority to accelerate remedies. Daniel muttered under his breath. Ethan read the clause twice. When was this triggered? "Potentially last quarter," Karen said. "Head office is reviewing." So even if operations cash flow, they can still force sale? Karen didn't answer immediately. That decision may not be mine. They drove home in silence. At the farm lane, Daniel finally spoke. Told you. Ethan stared at the orange sign nearest the road. No, he said quietly. You told me the problem. You didn't tell me we were done. 2 days later, neighbors started stopping by more often. Some came to sympathize. Some came to inspect. Some came because farm sales were tragedy mixed with opportunity, and people were honest enough to feel one while calculating the other. Mark Jensen leaned against the fence one afternoon. Heard the north quarter might sell separate. Nothing sold, Ethan said. Mark nodded slowly. Hope not. But his eyes still drifted toward the acreage. That evening Daniel handed Ethan a small stack of unopened mail. Missed these. Most were ordinary. Seed promo. Insurance notice. Parts catalog. Then one envelope stopped him. Cream paper. Law office return address from Cedar Rapids. He opened it standing right there in the kitchen. Inside was a formal letter requesting contact regarding the estate of Harold Mercer. Daniel looked up sharply. My Uncle Harold? You said he moved west years ago. He did. Haven't spoken in 25 years. Ethan read further. Harold Mercer had passed away in Oregon. The firm represented his estate, and they required immediate communication regarding a named beneficiary connected to agricultural property interests in Iowa. Daniel sat down slowly. That doesn't make sense. Did he own land? Not that I know of. The letter requested a meeting within 5 business days. No further details included. Ethan read it again. Then once more. For the first time since the orange signs appeared, something entered the room that had been absent for months. Not relief. Not certainty. But movement. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. Could be nothing. Maybe. Ethan folded the letter carefully. But it's something. Outside, the orange auction sign near the road leaned slightly in the wind. Inside, father and son stared at a single envelope on the table. Because when a family farm is slipping away, sometimes salvation doesn't arrive with rain, prices, or luck. Sometimes it arrives by mail. Daniel barely slept. Ethan knew because the kitchen light clicked on twice during the night, and each time he heard cabinet doors open, then close again. Coffee made. Left untouched. By sunrise, they were already in the truck heading east. The law office in Cedar Rapids sat on the 3rd floor of an old brick building above a hardware store. Clean brass directory downstairs. Quiet carpet upstairs. Too quiet for men used to engines and wind. A woman at the desk greeted them by name. That alone made Daniel uneasy. They were led into a conference room where a gray-haired attorney stood beside a stack of folders. Mr. Mercer, he said, shaking Daniel's hand. I'm Thomas Reed. Thank you for coming. Daniel said slowly. Your letter says my uncle named me in something. Reed nodded. Yes. Harold Mercer passed 3 weeks ago. We've been locating beneficiaries and finalizing assets. Daniel glanced at Ethan. I haven't seen Harold since I was a kid. That was noted, Reed said calmly. Despite distance, he remained aware of the family farm. Daniel frowned. How? Reed opened a folder. Harold received letters from your father for years. Copies were included in the estate records. Daniel stared. My dad wrote him. Regularly. That landed harder than anyone expected. Daniel's father had died 15 years earlier. Quiet man. Proud man. Not given to explaining himself. Reed continued. In those letters, he described the farm, the acreage, the seasons, and concerns that one day debt might force a sale outside the family. Ethan leaned forward slightly. And Harold responded? Rarely, Reed said. But he listened. The attorney slid a document across the table. Harold Mercer had built a successful irrigation supply company in Oregon. No children. No surviving spouse. Years earlier, he established a trust with one specific directive. If the Mercer farm in Iowa faced forced liquidation, designated funds were to be released to preserve family ownership, provided an active family operator remained on site. Daniel read the line twice, then lowered the paper. You're saying he planned for this? Yes. Ethan's voice stayed level. How much? Reed named the number. Neither man spoke. Because the number was enough. Enough to clear arrears. Enough to satisfy the lender. Enough to stop the sale. Not enough to make them rich. Enough to make them whole. Daniel's eyes reddened, though he would later deny it. I didn't even know he cared. Reed gave a small, respectful nod. Sometimes distance is not indifference. There were conditions. The funds had to be used first for debt stabilization tied directly to preserving the farm. Documentation required. Transfer through escrow. Immediate timeline due to pending liquidation activity. Ethan almost smiled. For the first time in months, urgency was on their side. By noon they were back at the bank. Karen Holt looked up as they entered with folders in hand. "I wasn't expecting you today." "You are now," Ethan said. They sat. The trust documents were reviewed once. Then again more carefully. Karen called regional counsel. Then head office. Then someone else. 2 hours later she returned to the table with a different expression than she'd worn the week before. "The acceleration review is suspended," she said. "Pending payoff and restructure execution." Daniel let out a long breath that seemed stored for years. Karen continued. "With these funds, delinquent balances can be cured, legacy debt retired, and operating credit reset under new terms." Ethan nodded. "The sale." Karen glanced toward the window. "Cancelled once payoff clears." 3 words. That was all. Cancelled once payoff clears. Back at the farm, Ethan drove straight to the lane entrance. The orange auction signs still stood there in the gravel. He pulled the first one out by hand. Then the second. Daniel came up beside him and grabbed the third. Neither said much. They didn't need to. By evening, the road was bare again. News spread faster than the original auction notice. It always did when disappointment changed directions. Neighbors arrived in trucks, pretending to just be passing by. Mark Jensen was first. "Heard the sale's off." "It is," Ethan said. Mark looked toward the barns, then the fields. "Well, I'll be." Another truck followed. Then another. Questions came in pieces. "What happened? Investor? Government program? Did corn jump overnight?" Daniel answered only once. "Family." That was enough. Over the next 2 weeks, the trust funds moved through escrow exactly as outlined. Past due balances were cleared. Medical debt retired. Equipment notes consolidated properly. Operating credit reset on terms built for farming instead of survival. Ethan handled every spreadsheet. Daniel handled every machine he could get his hands on. The change in him was visible. He stood straighter, moved quicker, started making plans again. One morning Ethan found him in the machine shed replacing belts on the old combine. "You know we could hire that out," Ethan said. Daniel snorted. "We're not rich. We're rescued." Then he added, quieter. "Different thing. Planting season came clean and on time for the first time in years. No collectors calling. No hidden envelopes left unopened. No meetings built around fear. Just work. Honest work. Difficult work. Familiar work. The kind both men understood best." Late one evening, after finishing the north field, Ethan shut down the tractor and found Daniel standing by the fence line, looking over all 720 acres as the sun dropped low. "You ever think about selling later?" Ethan asked. Daniel took his time answering. "Maybe someday," he said. "But not because we had to." That distinction mattered. They stood in silence as wind moved through the young crop in long green waves. Ethan thought about a man he had never met, an uncle in Oregon who had listened from far away, remembered home, and prepared for a day no one else could stop. Daniel seemed to be thinking the same thing. "I should have called him," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Probably." Then after a moment, "He called anyway." Daniel laughed once through his nose. The farm behind them was still the same land. Same fences. Same drains. Same black soil. But it no longer felt like something slipping away. It felt anchored again. And sometimes the difference between losing everything and saving it all is not weather, not markets, not luck. Sometimes it is one letter opened at exactly the right time.